Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing very, very well. Don't forget to get that refreshing cold drink, and if you're cold wherever you are, get yourself a lovely hot cup of cocoa with something warm, because I've got a fabulous story for you tonight. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, I knew my brother Kevin was up to something. Whatever it was most certainly not legal. I was in the kitchen area of our trailer, washing up coffee mugs in the sink. I so happened to observe my brother sitting at the small kitchen counter, acting very furtive. He kept glancing over his shoulder towards me, to check that I wasn't actually looking at him. He was counting out a large volume of cash, placing it surreptitiously in a little tin, hoping I wouldn't notice. He was oblivious to the fact that I'd seen him. Where did he get that kind of money from, I wondered. I could feel nausea rising up at the back of my throat. My heart felt as if it was weighted down by a heaviness. I had this ominous, disturbing, foreboding feeling that he was doing something perfidious, disrespectable if you like, that would make my father turn in his grave. Kevin did not like having empty pockets at any stage. Growing up, he'd always liked to surround himself with tons of cash, stylish leather jackets, fancy loafers, of course the most dashing of cell phones that you could find on the market. I knew he'd taken up a job in a hardware store in Portland for 3 days a week, but judging by the amount of sizable cash he had accumulated, he was clearly supplementing his income in some underhanded, unscrupulous way. My father had recently died of a sudden, unforeseen heart attack, a prodigious event which had taken us all by surprise, for he had no history of high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, or even heart disease. I gather he got on a bus, but everyone thought he'd fallen asleep. When the bus had completed all its routed journeys, the driver nudged his sleeping passenger, trying to arouse him from his sleep. He had been dead for a long time. I gather the poor man had the fright of his life. I was 23 years old at the time, my brother only 20. It was a devastating blow that hit us hard like a brick to the face, for we both adored our father. He had raised us up since we were toddlers, which was very commendable for a man all on his own. My father's biggest problem was that although he earned a sizable income, he had spent it all extravagantly on us, lashing out an insane, disproportionate amount of money on expensive private school fees, buying us the latest exorbitant gadgets, anything our hearts desired. I don't think he knew how to say no to us. We were used to having it all. I think he spoilt us rotten, was effusive, unrestrained in his spending, to make up for my mother's absence in our lives. He felt guilty that we didn't have a female role model to influence our lives in a maternal way. Unbeknownst to us, my dad had accumulated a great deal of debt over the years, so after he died so fortuitously, the apartment was finally sold. The money attained from selling the property was used to pay off all his overdrafts at the bank, so we were left with such a pittance that we were forced to start renting a trailer home for ourselves. It wasn't easy for two youngsters used to having everything. It felt as if we'd been thrown into the deep end, with the sharks struggling to keep our heads above water. We managed to find a halfway decent trailer to rent in the Virginian countryside that was brand new, respectable, decent. There were 5 of these trailers situated on this flowery meadow, all currently occupied with tenants, with the exception of trailer number 1, which was snapped up in a heartbeat by us. It was situated not far from the town of Portland, so its location was commodious for us. The pretty meadow was about the size of a football field, filled with colourful spring flowers in pinks, blues, purples and yellows. It was fringed by a beautiful wood grove, filled with clusters of red maple, spruce and oak trees. Superb mature specimens with curvaceous voluptuous trunks that reminded me of large, well-upholstered women. The forest ground was strewn with the prettiest ferns, verdant green mosses, as well as bluebells, daffodils and wild ginger. There was also a pretty waterfall that jutted out from a high oblique lopsided incline in the woods. It thundered and crashed into the rock pool below. It was a favourite watering hole for the white-tailed deers that regularly congregated there. From the moment we moved into the trailer, me and my brother would regularly walk into the heart of the wood grove. It was a very inviting, restful sanctuary for us. The meadow with the trailers was neatly hemmed in by wooden picket fencing on either side, filled with grazing cows. I was pleased to be living in a rural, idyllic setting, as it more than compensated for the fact that our luxury lifestyle had been expunged from us. It made me feel as if we were living rough on a camping holiday, which didn't seem half so bad when you thought about it from that perspective. So we told ourselves we were camping for a while, envisaging in our hearts a more comfortable future, not adverse to a few more luxuries. Me and my brother had not yet become familiar with the other residents in the trailer homes, but a couple of them looked a little rough around the edges, too much so for my liking. At the time I was working as a waitress in Portland, as a fast, efficient way of making good money. It was rather difficult adjusting to live our lowly lives so much more modestly, in a differential manner, almost overnight. But certainly on reflection it was an excellent life lesson for us, one well worth learning. My brother was working 3 days a week at a hardware store in Portland. It was a job he was beginning to enjoy. Sadly, our mother had abandoned us a very long time ago, admitting in a short, cursory, abrupt note to my father that she couldn't hack the responsibility of taking care of us. "I never knew children could be a noose around your neck," she had written. "I'm sorry, but I just can't live such a suffocating lifestyle. The kids are yours to take care of." She wanted to live a carefree, independent, bohemian life without the challenges of raising children. She did phone us once a year on our birthdays, but other than that, we never heard a dicky bird from her. I never allowed it to get me down or take it personally, as that was the way my mother was. She was hardwired that way. She was nonconformist, a free spirit if you like, not the kind of person who was willing to make sacrifices for others. My father once described her as the most selfish woman he'd ever known. She wanted to embrace that hipster, carefree lifestyle, and to hell with anybody else. One afternoon, shortly after a catnap, I heard my brother Kevin chatting on his cell phone. I decided to eavesdrop. Maybe it would give me a clue as to what he was up to with all that spare cash he was accumulating. I was hoping to God he was not selling drugs of some kind. "Hello. Yes, that's right. I'm 6 foot, 170 pounds. Yes. No, I would describe myself as extremely good-looking. I have that Ashton Kutcher look about me. Dark wavy hair, hazel eyes, a sallow complexion. Yes, I would consider myself quite muscular. I work out regularly." "Sorry, what did you say? I didn't get that, ma'am. Have I ripped what? Have I ripped a peck? Sorry, I'm not sure what you're saying, ma'am. Could you say that again?" Oh, I see. Am I ripped? Have I got pecs? Yes, ma'am, I've got all that. You won't be disappointed. I think you'll be quite impressed when you see me. I assure you, I've had no complaints from my female clients. They're very impressed with the whole package, if you know what I mean." "Sorry, ma'am? What's that you said?" "Oh, about mucus. No, I don't have mucus. I'm actually very healthy. No flu or colds." Oh, you meant muscles. Yes, I do have muscles. Lots of them." "Sorry? Who's Cuddlebody? Is that your surname, madam?" Oh, good body. Yes, ma'am. Yes, as I was saying, I do have a good body." "It'll be $500 an hour. Yes, I'm willing to do almost anything. That's right, I'll show you the price list during dinner. Then you can decide on the services that suit you best. You don't want your husband to know about our interlude? Of course not. You can count on my complete discretion. But I feel I should warn you that the privacy policy will cost you an extra $50. Oh, good. You're not worried about the money. So you want me to meet Ron Sensor? Who's Ron Sensor, madam? Just so you know, I don't do threesomes of any kind. Whoever Ron Sensor is, he can't come on the date with us, if that's what you're thinking. Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you properly. Your voice was really rather faint. You want me to meet at the Royal Senesta Hotel on Washington Street. Oh, I see. Fine, see you then. How old did you say you were, madam? 62. No, I have no problems with your age. I'll see you then. Kevin, "What on earth are you doing?" I piped. "I heard you on the phone. Are you a male prostitute offering older women personal services?" "In a manner of speaking," said Kevin. "Don't judge me, sis. I need the extra cash desperately." "Look, sis, it's not as bad as you think. Most of the women want a hug or a kiss. Sometimes they just want to talk. And you know I'm a very good listener. I shower them with kisses, compliment them profusely, and they pay me for the privilege. Now, what's wrong with that? The woman I visited last week wanted me to crawl around her house like a cat, so that she could stroke me. Most of them are old dears, wanting a little male company. Some like to feel my muscle. What's wrong with that? They're lonely. They have money. They're willing to pay me good bucks for my time. I've been to some amazing places for dinner. Last Tuesday night I had the most delicious lamb shank. The meat fell off the bone. It was so juicy and tender. The old dear who took me out wanted me to pretend I was her boyfriend. All her friends were very jealous, but I went along with it. It sounds positively sick, Kevin. How could you? So if they want intimate services, I suppose you're willing to oblige. Am I right? You'll offer up your entire body for them on a silver platter. Look, I'm not adverse to it, sis. I've been doing this for a week. I've made a lot of money, as well as some old lonely woman very happy on my account. I consider it a sort of therapy, a service for lonely widows, if you like. Really, Kevin, you should be ashamed of yourself. You're taking advantage of old ladies. Oh, please, sis, stop overreacting and being so dramatic. I know what I'm doing. As far as I'm concerned, it's the other way. They're the ones taking advantage of me. I don't mind a jot." I knew full well that talking to my brother out of his latest entrepreneurial inspiration would likely drive him directly towards it with even more zealousness. He was really rather inclined to contrariness, so I decided to just shut up and say nothing more about the matter. All of a sudden there was a loud rapping sound at our trailer door that caught me so off guard I almost jumped out of my skin. "This is the police," came a man's deep, raspy voice. "Could you let me in?" I rolled my eyes. "Please God, Kevin, don't let this be about you," I said. "Don't tell me one of your old ladies has already filed a complaint against you or reported you for prostituting services." I opened the door surreptitiously, allowing the policeman into the trailer. He was a plain-clothes detective wearing a brown suede jacket, blue Levi jeans, along with a big buckled belt with an eagle medallion. He presented us with his police badge. "Please sit down, detective," I said, offering him a seat in the living area of our trailer. "Can I get you a drink of some sort?" "No, thank you very much." "Look, I'll get straight to the point," he said, rubbing his brown moustache awkwardly. "I'm Detective Lewis Roxburgh. I'm inquiring about the dead body of a man found in the woods this morning. The body has been deceased for about 12 hours. Do you happen to know anything about it?" My brother and I exchanged nonplussed looks. I shrugged my shoulders, shaking my head vigorously. "No, sorry, detective. I never heard a word about it. But when you among the trailers here, we don't know the other people." "I see," said the detective. "So you heard nothing?" "A dead body, detective. When you say it was found in the woods, are you referring to the wooded area that flanks this meadow? Am I right?" "The very same. Did you happen to hear any strange noises last night? Any gunshots, perhaps? Did you see anybody suspicious loitering around the premises? Or see any unfamiliar cars parked out here on the meadow?" "We have heard strange sounds, detective, of a woman screaming in distress, if that's what you're wondering. It happened last night. It was a very, very troubling sound. It caused the hair on the back of my head to stand on edge. It freaked us out, detective. It was very, very discomposing. I'm afraid my brother and I were too scared to investigate it. We weren't going to go out into the woods at the dead of night. I am adverse to doing that kind of thing. I'm not that brave, I'm afraid. You never know what's out there." "Oh, that screaming sound. You're probably talking about a female fox. They sound like a woman screaming as if they're being murdered. It's not an uncommon sound to hear in the woods. Nothing to worry about. She was probably letting the male foxes know she was available for mating. I'm not worried about those kind of animal sounds. What I want to know is, did you hear a series of gunshots last night? A man screaming for help, perhaps. Possibly something like that. No, we heard nothing of the kind, Detective. I did hear a car drive down the meadow. It was not one I'd seen here before. It was red. It seemed to be staying in the parking lot for quite a while, as though the occupant was waiting for someone. I didn't see them, though. I was in bed at the time, although I did hear the car door slam a couple of times. Did you know what make of car it was? Asked the detective, taking out his notebook. You say it was red? I nodded. The make? I think it was a red Chevrolet. What happened, Detective? Who got killed? Should we be worried about this? There isn't a deranged psychopath wandering around murdering people, is there? No, nothing like that to cause undue alarm. At the moment, the body has not been identified. The manner of death is suspicious according to the medical examiner. It appears the man sustained a nasty blow to the head. His shirt was removed from his body. It is hanging in shreds on the tree. It appears someone is making a statement. We believe it's rather personal, as if someone had an axe to grind with the man. You mean this was an intentional murder? Exactly. We think the murder is close to home. Someone who knew the person personally was seeking revenge, maybe a spawned lover of some sort. The person who killed him was so enraged he shredded up the shirt. We have a theory that he might have been a murder for hire. The problem is that he was wearing a camouflage gear, so there's also a faint possibility he was illegally poaching in those woods. We do know there is a sizable deer population there. Well, I would say the man must have been poaching, sir. People only ever wear camouflage gear for hunting, not as a fashion statement, surely. Well, we have performed a fingerprint analysis on the body, have been unable to determine who he is. Without a name to connect the body to a person, we can't pursue any further inquiries. How did you find the body, sir? One of your neighbours, an elderly lady. Her name's Nora, I think, with the pretty hanging geranium plant pots in her front yard. I think it's trailer number 2, if I'm not mistaken. Well, she was walking her dog this morning, stumbled across the grisly crime. The poor woman was in a dreadful state. She came to the police station shaking so much that we couldn't get a word out of her, until we gave her some tranquilizers. It's our opinion that she's keeping something from us. She hasn't told us the full story. I'm certain of it. She was the one that discovered the deceased body. It was lying dangling on a branch next to the shredded shirt, along with a hunting rifle and a head torch. Your neighbour felt very certain that someone was peering at her through the underbrush. I gather her dog was barking continuously at one particular spot in the hedgerow. It then began to cower and became very afraid. She was very frightened, so she vacated the area as quickly as she could. She was under the impression that the murderer was hiding there in the bushes, watching her. Well, I would suggest, Detective, that you search the woods then. I mean, what if the perpetrator is still out there? The woods have already been thoroughly searched. The perpetrator has long since gone. We've been unable to find any other evidence, other than several rounds of spilled gun shells from the man's rifle lying strewn all over the forest floor. It is an exceedingly bizarre situation. I think, sir, it sounds like he was probably poaching. All those spilled gun shells, the camouflage clothes, the rifles. Maybe someone followed him into the woods. Someone who intended to deliberately harm him. Someone with nefarious intent. I mean, it would be the quintessential perfect spot to dispose of a deceased body. You're good. If you want a job with the police force, let us know. You think like a policeman. Well, I better leave now. You've been most helpful. He handed us his card. Get in touch if you see anything suspicious. I looked directly at my brother. You hear that, Kev? Someone was murdered in those woods. The police can't even identify the suspect, but my guess is that he was poaching. Maybe someone followed him surreptitiously into the forest. They murdered him there. But with what? The detective said a blow to the head. Maybe the person used the back of a rifle, which meant they must have got close to the man. Very close. I think we should go and visit our neighbour, the woman who reported the body to the police. That Nora lady. Maybe she knows more than she's saying. We'll go and visit her, introduce ourselves as her new neighbour." I began to wrap up a box of chocolates while grabbing a bottle of fizzy grape juice. I had in mind what I needed to do. "Are you coming, Kev, or not? We're going to introduce ourselves to our brand new neighbour. We're going to get her to tell us exactly what she saw this morning. You heard the policeman for yourself. He was telling us that she hadn't told them everything. So we're going to find out exactly what the pieces are, the missing pieces to this curious, enigmatic puzzle." "But why?" asked Kevin. "Why do we even care?" "Because if there is someone in those woods, Kevin, they could be a potential threat to us. We need to know about it. Don't you understand? I'm responsible for keeping us safe. I need to know that there isn't a psychopath loitering around in these parts. Otherwise we'll have to move. You can never be too careful. Our father would expect us to at least be vigilant." Before long we were knocking at trailer number 2. We could see an old woman twitching at her lacy net curtains to check who was at her door. I could see she looked decidedly nervous. Her cute little Yorkshire Terrier was yakking away. "Hello," she said, pulling the door ajar with her Yorkshire Terrier scooped up in her arms. The miniature terrier stopped barking, stared at us curiously with its button-brown eyes, its tail wagging profusely. Someone had found a deceased body in the woods, that it looked like a possible murder. I was the one that reported the dead body to the police this morning. "Of course," she whispered, "I never told them what really happened. I knew they'd think I was a silly old bat, so I made up a story that was believable to them. But they did discern I was hiding something. They even said as much to me, but I kept my lips zipped." "And were you? Were you hiding something, I mean?" "Of course, dear. When you get to my age, you have to be very, very guarded. I'm 83 years old, you know, still going strong. If I told the police my story, they'd probably think I belonged in a nut house, have me institutionalized, something like that. I couldn't bear that. I'm so happy living on my own." "Will you please tell us your story? Hands on heart, we won't tell the police what you told us." "I am rather wary of even telling the two of you my story. It sounds so fictitious, so nonsensical, so spurious, but I do know what I saw, and I wasn't imagining it. You can tell me you saw a fairy, I'd believe you. I'm really open-minded, non-partisan, unbiased about that sort of thing. I tell you what, why don't you tell us your story from the very beginning? We're very interested." "Very well. I don't know if you've heard that screaming sound last night. It sounded like a woman was getting murdered. Now, I had an abusive husband for many long years. I was terrified of him. I lived in fear every single day of my life. I couldn't sit back and do nothing. The thought of a villainous thug harming his wife left me feeling very affronted. I left my little Button safely here in the trailer, and armed with my flashlight and my rifle, I ventured into those woods. It wasn't an easy decision for me to make at all. I'm not eager to walk around in the dark. Actually, I'm quite afraid. But I felt so angry. In truth, if I'd seen a man trying to murder his wife, I would have probably shot him dead at point-blank range without a moment's hesitation, even if the police locked me away, throwing away the key. Someone has to take a stand for women's rights at some point. I was determined to help this mysterious woman, but I was concerned that I might be too late. I got an airy feeling that something wasn't right. I can't explain it to you, but the woods felt menacing, foreboding, exceedingly intimidating, bodeful. I told myself it was the wind blowing through the trees, the ethereal shadows of light dancing through the boughs, tricking me into believing that I was being watched by unseen eyes. Once again I heard the same screaming sound. I became frantic, darting through the trees, cocking my rifle. Then I heard a man's raised voice, along with gunshots going off. My heart almost bolted out of my chest. I was so devastated. I felt absolutely certain the man had shot his wife dead. I realised I'd arrived on the scene far too late to save the poor woman's life. I decided that the very least I could do for her was to see what he looked like for the purposes of identification with the police, so that the man didn't get away with his grisly murder. I had my suspicions that he could possibly be burying her in the woods. I think I might have read too many Agatha Christie novels, so my imagination was in overdrive. I began to stealthily move towards the sound. I didn't want to draw any attention to myself, but luckily with a full moon shining, along with the open canopy above my head, I could see very clearly. The visibility was absolutely excellent. I also noticed that there was no chirping crickets or frogs, which I did think decidedly odd. I concealed myself behind a large oak tree. That was when I saw the man. He was cocking his rifle at something. I've never seen a man look more terrified or discomposed in my entire life. His eyes were as round as saucers, his mouth dropping to the ground, his body shaking like a jelly. And when I say shaking, I mean trembling so desperately badly. Lying next to him was the body of a large deer. A deer that he had obviously only recently killed. I realised then that he had been poaching. It was only then I heard the curious growling sound. "Are you all right?" I asked. "Can I get you anything?" I could see that the old woman was now physically shaking. "If you could pour me a gin and tonic, dear, I think that would strengthen my nerves considerably." I quickly handed her a gin. She glugged it down in a single gulp. "Ah, that's so much better. It's called Dutch courage. Let's see, where was I? Ah, yes, the growl. Oh, the growl was worse than a lion. It went right through me. It seared through me like a knife to the heart. It was a physically forceful sound, very unnerving indeed. That was when I knew that the poacher was being pursued by a predator. But what? I couldn't imagine. I thought maybe someone's pet tiger had been released or something, and escaped or something. You see, at this point I'd not seen anything, but I did sense a very intimidating presence. That was when I saw the creature. It was standing yards away from me, glaring at the man with deep-set dark eyes, but they gave off a red traffic light colour. This thing, it was monstrously huge with a bullet-shaped head. He was about the width and height of a front door, but he looked decidedly human. Only he was covered in long flowing dark hair that was exceedingly black, black as coal. The moonlight gave me an excellent view of the creature. The next thing I knew was that the creature began to roar. This time he wasn't growling, he was roaring. The roar was thunderous. It sounded louder than the waterfall. I was so terribly afraid. I could barely move a muscle. I was frozen to the spot. I have never known fear like that in all my life. Even being married to an abuser, I haven't experienced a fear as bad as this. It was off the charts. The man was screaming, "Help! Help!" He fired about 2 more bullets at the creature, but missed every time. I think his fear disorientated him. The creature grabbed him, began to shake him very hard, as though he was very aggrieved. He pointed at the deer, then to the man. I heard him say something like, "Uncantau gubacanina," or something like that. I mean, I can't speak what language he was speaking, but it sounded like that. The man said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to kill it." For some unfathomable reason, he knew why the inflamed creature was so antagonized. And that was when I realized that the steamed-up creature was hopping mad with the man for killing the deer. I couldn't figure out why he was so cross about that. The next thing he did was he slapped the man hard on the head with a single blow using his hand. It really looked like a gentle tap for him. But the trouble is, when a thing like that gives you a tap, it's likely going to kill you, much like if you tap an ant. The man fell backwards. His eyes rolled in the back of his sockets like white balls. He flinched, groaned, and then just died. I watched in awe as the seething creature pulled off the man's shirt, shredding it into pieces with his hands, as if it was nothing, hanging it on the tree. Then he threw the man over the branch, where he dangled like a lifeless mannequin, his eyes staring into space like glass marbles. The creature was shaking his head furiously. I could hear him say something in that strange language he spoke. If I was to guess what he was saying, it would have been, "You stupid idiot. You only got what was coming to you. You don't kill a deer for sport. Not on my watch, you don't." "What makes you think he said that?" I asked. "That's the odd, peculiar thing. He spoke in a language I couldn't comprehend, but I felt that that was what he was saying. I've never had an experience like that before. It was very weird. It was like I understood a language I've never heard before." The creature then moved over to where I was hiding. He knew I was there. That was the curious thing. How could he know where I was? I think he'd seen me hiding there. I could hardly believe it. He was so aware of his own environment, in touch with every sound, smell, movement. I became afraid. I thought he was going to kill me, I really did. I mean, I felt like a doll in his presence, because standing yards away from him, I think I must have come up to his belly button. He looked directly at me, with his eyes. I realised they weren't red close up, but a deep treacle colour. But they looked kind, really kind. That was the surprising thing. He said something to me in his peculiar language, which sounded like it contained lots of clicks. I thought I heard him say, "I mean you no harm," and then he was gone like that. I watched him glide away in the woods on his long legs. He looked like he was floating. He was so graceful. I was shaking so much after what had transpired. I was about to return to the trailer when I heard a man's voice shouting, "Rick! Rick! Rick, where are you?" I think it must have been his buddy coming to collect him, and of course the hunting trophy. But when he saw his dead friend lying there on the tree, I heard him say, "Bloody hell!" Then he just hightailed it out of there so fast. I heard his truck engine starting up. He drove out of there like a bat out of hell. So you went to the police station the following morning to report the dead body that you'd seen from the previous night? That's right. Now, I'm not normally a liar, but you can see why I would tell the police a bogus story. If I personally find it hard to digest, imagine a sceptical, cynical officer. They would think I was completely batty. "Yes, ma'am, you say you saw a hairy man-like creature in the woods kill this individual." "I think you saw a Bigfoot," said Kevin. He picked up his cell phone and began to search on YouTube for pictures of Bigfoot. He found the famous picture of the Bigfoot seen at Bluff Creek. "Did the creature you saw look like this?" he asked. Nora studied the picture intently. "Yes, I would say it did look rather like that, but bigger, taller, wider, slimmer, muscular, much more muscular, with thicker, longer hair. This hair on this creature is much more scant. Oh, and yes, the face was much more human than this one has. This one has more of an ape-like face." That all happened about 6 years ago. Me and my brother went to investigate the wooded area. We saw no signs of the Bigfoot there. I'm glad to tell you that the deceased body was eventually identified for burial. The man in question had been poaching in these parts for a long time, along with being involved in some robberies where it was believed he was responsible for killing a shopkeeper who refused to hand over his money from the till. As for my brother, he didn't last long as a male escort after he got promoted to manager of the hardware store. He then decided to give up his nighttime moonlighting. We now both live in an upmarket rented apartment in Portland. Nora sadly died about 6 months after her Bigfoot encounter from a blood clot to the brain, but she lived a full, happy life. We adopted her cute little Yorkie Buttons. Believe it or not, it was my curiosity in regards to this case that finally alerted me as to what I wanted to do with my life. I now work for the Portland Police, hence why my name in the story is fictitious. I would like to remain anonymous. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.